everybody, and welcome back to Chats, Stats, and Fun Facts. To another season preview. And today we are talking about Benjamin Cremaschi. Saur, it's the first thing that comes to mind when I say the golden boy, Mr. Cremaschi.
Rockstar looks, rockstar future, man. He's an absolute rockstar in that midfield, and I feel like he's going to have a great ceiling and a great career at Inter Miami, at least for the foreseeable future. So for me, Benha is our golden boy, and I can't wait to see what the future has in store for him.
Yeah, his sophomore season last year, I think he might have gotten a little cursed by the television ad at the beginning of the season. He follows that up with a little bit of an injury, gets off to a slow start. By the time he comes back, we bring in Redondo. But here is his final stat line: 27 games, 13 starts, just under 1,300 minutes, 4 goals, 1 assist. I think he needed to come down in minutes played from his first year to his second year, just because that's a lot of minutes. I think he played 2,500 minutes in his debut season. And that's a lot for an 18-year-old. I think it was good for him to come down. I maybe would have wanted to see him get 250, 300 more minutes. But ultimately, I'm quite happy with the fact that his role was reduced in terms of minutes on the body, because I think it's going to do good for him moving forward. But I think now he's ready to ramp it back up. He's hitting 20. He's in year 3 as a professional. I think that this is like the year where he really turns into a professional. He'll hit 100 career appearances, all of those things. For the record, my fun fact is that he has started the last 2 national team games for his country. So big accomplishments, big opportunities for him there. And where are we at with Benha?
There's so much to talk about Benha because he's a very interesting case study in young players and our expectations of them. One season, you see him play so many games and he's having good goal contributions, really leaving a name for himself on the pitch. And then next season, and as you mentioned, for good measure as well, he didn't have as many appearances, but I still think he did have a good impact on this team. I would view Benjamin Cremaschi's season as very positive. And towards the end of the season as well, when we had a few injuries, you could see his minutes ramp up. He was getting involved as well, getting goals, maybe not as regularly as people expect from him or expected from him after his first season, but he's still getting that contributions. And I think he had a good overall progression last season. And this season, I think it just has to be that next step ahead as well. Like a lot of our midfielders, I think we have the same conversation with a lot of them, but he also has to take that next step up. And I think he's ready for the responsibility to have a bigger role on this team.
Yeah, I completely agree. He's got the talent. And I understand that he might get a little bit of criticism just because if you don't pay attention to him long enough, you don't see the things he really shines at: finding good positions, having good vision. He's got good understanding of how to move in and around Lionel Messi. But sometimes he loses the ball in his first touch, and that's going to be an attribute of his game moving forward. He might improve it a little bit, but he's never going to be a technician like Sergio Busquets. But that's okay, because he has other very impressive qualities, and it is just a matter of seeing him on the pitch and with the opportunity to sort of explore those more. I think it's very interesting. In 2023, he was at times our best player early on in the season, and of course that was at a time when Inter Miami didn't have a ton of talent around him, but he was sort of leading the line for portions of the season for Inter Miami. He was the most exciting thing that was happening. And then when Lionel Messi does come, and Busquets and Alba and Gomez and Toldavilas and Facundo Fabias in that summer of 2023, he's still able to find himself a role. He was a starting midfielder for that team that went on to win the Leagues Cup, that had so much success. He was the guy that was putting Diego Gomez on the bench because he was outshining him and outplaying him. And so all of that still exists for Benjamin Cremaschi. I think the injury last year, right at the beginning of preseason, set his season back a little bit. And that's why I think we didn't get to see him quite as much or as take as much of a step forward as we wanted to. But I think that's coming this year. Like I said, this is a big year for him as a professional. Year 3, getting to, by the end of the season, hopefully that 100 appearance mark. And that's like him stepping into who he can really be. Let's talk about how he fits into this team, because based on one preseason game, that's all we've seen so far. Whenever you're watching this, we've only seen one preseason game so far. It looked like Inter Miami under Javier Mascherano is going to play more of a 4-2-3-1, with that number 10 role being Lionel Messi, which means he really only, I mean, he might be able to fit on the wings. I think he has the skill set to potentially do that. But you would think more classically he would fit in one of those two midfielder spots. And there's a lot of competition there. Busquets, Telasco Segovia, Yannick Bright, Federico Redondo. So where does he fit in on this team and in this lineup?
It's really interesting that you mentioned that right-hand side of the pitch, because I do think when we talk about how Javier Mascherano wants to play with Messi as that number 10 right winger role, and then essentially only two midfielders. So Benjamin Cremaschi is limited to fighting for only two spots. That comes down to one spot because Sergio Busquets is basically guaranteed to start at least majority of the games. Whenever we're playing the bigger opposition, Sergio Busquets is going to start. So then you're competing for just that one spot as an out-and-out central midfielder. I think it's really good for Benjamin Cremaschi that there's so many different players in that role and so many different options, because competition, I think, is going to really bring out the best of him. It's going to challenge him to get better. But I do think while he may not be up the pecking order for that central midfield role, I really would like to see him play a little bit on the right-hand side of the pitch and see how he can do there. He's a really good runner in terms of his box-to-box attributes. I always have seen him as a number 8. I know we can have a conversation about where he actually fits in terms of his positioning, whether he's being played as a number 6, as we've seen with the last two US men's national team games, or does he play as a number 8 or maybe even number 10? But there's definitely a conversation to be had about that right midfielder, slightly wide role for him and how he'd be able to adapt to that, because I think he has all the attributes to be able to do that role for this team. But at this point in time, with what we've seen so far, I think he is a box-to-box midfielder whose greatest attribute is making those late runs into the box, finding that position where there's a little bit of space. As soon as there's a cutback, he's there to finish it off. Last season, he did it a fair few times, got those goals from being in good positions. I think that's where he brings the best to this team.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because he has the tool set to play on that right wing, but we've never really seen it before, or the left wing. In fact, I actually thought maybe last year we would see him a little bit out there on that left side, just because Tata Martino would experiment with these types of things. And it never really happened. This year, though, you mentioned it, he played as the deepest of 3 midfielders against in the U.S. men's national team's first game of the January camp. And so I thought that was interesting. I was wondering if there was maybe a conversation between Mauricio Pochettino, who's Argentine, and Javier Mascherano, who's also Argentine, about what they might want from Cremaschi during this camp. I wonder if there was a conversation there. And it could go either way. Maybe Mascherano wants to see Cremaschi in that role. Maybe Pochettino wants to see Cremaschi in that role, and they're signaling to each other. I'm curious about that. I've also always felt, and I don't think a lot of people support this idea, but I've always thought he could actually be best as a number 10, because even though he is a little bit ball insecure, and that is a classic trait of number 10s, he's so good at finding space high up the pitch. And if you do lose the ball there, it's okay, because you have your defense behind you set up. And so him finding, and this is what I think his real superpower is, finding those spaces high up the pitch where he has space and time to do stuff on the ball, and then the vision to make that final pass in. I think those are his 2 biggest strengths. And I think those 2 things profile well to a number 10. So I am curious if we see him not obviously starting over Lionel Messi or pushing Messi out of that number 10 role, but if when Messi takes a break, we might switch up our midfield, give ourselves a little bit more athleticism, more fight in the midfield by putting Cremaschi at that number 10 role. That's something I would be interested to see at some point this season. So I think there's a number of places, all this to be said, I think there's a number of places where he could fit in. And that means he's going to find minutes. He's going to find significant minutes. I would like to see him get to that 2,000 minute mark this year and really take the next step in his career. Where do you think he does fit into this rotation, though?
I think you absolutely nailed it. The fact that we're discussing Cremaschi playing in number of different positions is actually a really positive sign, because that means he's not limited to that just one central midfield role or spot that I talked about previously. I think we're going to see him being used in multiple different ways. And maybe that's what his attributes and utility to this team is, being that Swiss Army knife that can play as a number 8 when we need to, can play as a number 10 if we need to push him further up, and maybe, just maybe, be that number 6 for this team if Javier Mascherano thinks that's what he wants from him. So I think he's going to get a lot more minutes this season compared to last season, but he's also going to have multiple different roles to play. Yes, there may be one specific role, maybe it's the number 10 or the number 8 that he does best of all. But I think the fact that Benjamin Cremaschi can play multiple different positions is a positive. I don't see that as a negative. Just because he doesn't have that one pigeonhole role for him doesn't mean he's not fit for this starting squad.
Yeah, and listen, one of the things that we've noticed with all these transfers that have come into Inter Miami is it feels like versatility is a big asset or something that they're really targeting when they're going out and getting these players. And I know, again, you're a curmudgeon and you don't like that, but I think Javier Mascherano really likes that. And so for a player like Cremaschi who could sit, who might be able to adapt to sitting a little bit deeper, I don't know if that's going to be his strength right away, but it feels like something he could grow into maybe. And then playing higher up the ball, maybe playing on the out wide a little bit, like that level of versatility, I think is something that Javier Mascherano might really like and might try and really groom into Cremaschi. And I think that leads us to the last conversation we wanted to have is what is the future of Benjamin Cremaschi? Because after year one, he was ranked as one of the top 50 wonder kids in the world, is a player that I think a lot of people see as having a really high future. He's one of the only players in his age group, potentially the only player in his age group that has been called up to the U.S. men's national team and gotten real opportunities there. He did that even in a, I know the January camp is more for the MLS players, but he even got called up and got an appearance in a full men's team camp. And we heard Christian Pulisic say really good things about him after that. So, and also that was under Greg Berhalter and under Mauricio Pochettino. So multiple coaches at the national team level have seen this kid and thought he has really something. What does he need to do in 2025 to take the next step towards achieving that something?
I think one really underrated aspect of Cremaschi, and this is just me judging based on what I've seen from interviews and stuff, he seems to have his head on his shoulders. He seems like a really good kid who works hard and is willing to make that sacrifice to make that next step or get better. So I think if he puts his head down and just keeps grinding and doing the hard work and just doing the basic things well, last season was a little bit of a blimp, because I think that, as you mentioned, the injury derailed it a little bit and he didn't get that many chances in the team. I think this season he will get the chances. And when he does, he just needs to take them with both hands. He has all the attributes to do that. I think it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Now he needs to take that 3 step forward. And I have full confidence that he's going to be able to do that. Just get more involved and confident in asking for the ball when on the pitch and asserting himself a little bit more on the pitch. And he has all the attributes to be able to dominate games when needed. So I fully trust him.
Yeah. And the thing about Cremaschi is that his floor is already pretty nice. Like, you don't put him on the pitch and worry about him losing you games because he does work hard. He fights. He is sort of a classic box-to-box midfielder at his floor. And then you add the peak and what he could be, and it gets really exciting. We saw Diego Gomez, who I think is a little bit more physical than Cremaschi, but not a ton, take a huge step from year 1 to year 2. I would love to see Cremaschi take a similar step from year 2 to year 3. And now he's got those minutes in his legs. I'm really excited. Okay, we're having this conversation about what he can develop into, and that leads to potentially making a move over to Europe, which I think has been the idea most fans have had about Cremaschi since he broke out, really, is that this guy has a European future and it's just a matter of time and development. And is it going to happen at age 19 or age 22? Like, that's the question. And I guess, what do you want to see from him in 2025 to help him, if that is what he wants to do and if that is his dream? But he signs the new contract last year. It felt like was a stepping stone to get him ready to have both Miami get a nice transfer fee from him and also, setting him up to get the development he needs to make that jump. What do you want to see from him to make that jump in 2025?
Consistency. I think sometimes last season when we saw him on the pitch, we were left a little bit underwhelmed that, we wanted to see a little bit more. If he can start putting in consistently good performances, doesn't have to be otherworldly every single game, but consistently good performances, I think that's the most I can ask of him. Just have a consistently good 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 performances every single game. have that level of impact, start impacting games while being either on the pitch from the start or coming off the bench. And that, I think, will set him up really well for what's to come in the future. Consistency.
Okay, here's my over-under for 2025, and this will extend all the way through January 2026. So, keep it going a little bit longer than 2025. But do you think he is over/under transfer fee of $4 million US when he does make that move? And obviously, if he doesn't make the move through next January's transfer window, European transfer window, then that would be 0, and it would be the under.
I'm going to go with over. I'm confident with Benha. I think with the way that the market is, and especially in Europe, I think he's going to go for like $5 to $7 million. So I think it's an over 4 million.
I'm going to go under because I think he goes the following summer. I think that's when it happens.
That's a cop out.
But I think he will go for more than 4 when that happens. Okay. Any other predictions for Benha for 2025? Any hot takes or anything else we haven't talked on yet?
Now score a few goals, score a couple of bangers, and I'll be a happy watcher.
He had a game-winning goal against Charlotte FC on the road this year. Give us another 2 of those, and I think we'll be really happy. All right, guys. See you in the next one. Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Do us a favor and hit that like and subscribe button. Since our first viewer, sharing this with you all has been the very best part. So from the beginning until the end, thank you for being a part of this, and have a wonderful day.